CW Music Reviews here. I'm CW, and this is going to be a music review of the new Drake album, Views. Drake is a Toronto singer-songwriter, rapper, previously an actor. Before he blew up in the late 2000s, he was pretty much known as being an actor for the Canadian TV show Degrassi. But eventually he blew up with some mixtapes and a few well-known and really widely accepted commercial albums. But then he decided to get a bit more experimental-ish with Nothing Was the Same. That was somewhat okay-ish. I think Drake was trying to do this put-on thing that was in reaction of all these people saying, "Oh, Drake is soft, Drake is a pussy, he's a faggot." When really, I think Drake plays kind of a pivotal role in hip-hop when it comes to a soft side, a vulnerable side. I mean, I don't like Drake, but I see his vital importance for the genre as of right now. Ironically enough, last year was pretty much his biggest year, where he dropped 2 projects that supposedly weren't albums at all, but let's be honest, they were albums. If you're reading this, it's too late, and What a Time to Be Alive. I listened to the former. I somehow liked the former. I hated If You're Reading This, It's Too Late at first, but I gave it a few more listens and I warmed myself up to these really cool beats, and Drake really held his own as a rapper on this project. So, Views from the 6, or now called Views. This was a really hyped release. A lot of people were waiting on this album to drop at some point. This is supposedly what Drake has self-referred to as his classic on this album anyway. And from what it looks like, I think there was a lot of hype leading up to this release, a lot of promise leading up to this release, since while I just liked If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, it seemed to demonstrate Drake really coming into his own as a rapper instead of just being all sappy and trying to have a big boy voice or anything of that nature. He had some artistic progression going for him on that project. Added to that, he had probably the biggest single of last year, Hotline, Bling. I like that track. This track actually appears as a bonus track for Views. It's a nice pop rap song, really catchy hook, kind of a reggae vibe to the pop trap thing going on. It's cool, I like it. Given how much hype there is for the release, given that it's Drake, given that he was showing some promise for me, in my head I thought to myself, okay, I need to love this album. There's no rationale that says that I can just like this album or just be somewhere in the middle with this album. I need to love the hell out of this album. There was going to be no in between. I was either going to love this album or I was going to either strongly dislike or maybe even hate this album. And after giving this a listen, I don't love this album. It's easily the most disappointing record of the year. Now, this album's about 20 tracks long, Hotline Bling being the bonus track, and it's about 73 minutes in length. Way too long. One of my big complaints about If You're Reading This, It's Too Late was the fact that it was an hour. I don't have the patience to listen to an entire Drake project for any longer than an hour, even though, yeah, I did like that project. Pretty much the summary for this album is, when he's not doing this pop song or R&B song where he's getting introspective about a past lover, he's doing these rap songs that demonstrate braggadocio that isn't well executed. So on that note, we have the opening track, Keep the Family Close. I like this track. It certainly sets the mood for what could have been a pretty great album. It's pretty much a pop ballad about how he regrets spending so much time with this lover instead of spending time with his family, where he pretty much notes that he should have kept his family closer than his female lovers. How all of his let's just be friends aren't friends anymore. Now he can't rely on them. A bit bitter, but it works. This instrumental is pretty much a kind of a traditional pop vibe with these horns and strings going on in the background. There's an occasional drum fill that really adds tension to the track before it breaks off and goes back into what it was originally doing. It's a cool opener. It's not a fantastic opener, but it's a cool opener. And then my disappointment begins. The track 9. I don't get what the big deal is with Drake understanding that turning the 6 upside down makes a 9. I mean, I understand that the 6 is his hometown of Toronto, but he just makes it sound so deep and so clever that he's taking the 6, turning it upside down, and making it a 9. This is like one of the bigger, underwhelming hooks or punchlines that Drake has. Although I do like this trap beat, it's got a minimalist sound to it. It's pretty cool. But for the most part in this track, he's not really delivering any lines that I'm finding interesting or even good. Basically struggle rap that's trying to pass itself off as bragging rights, which is irrational. I do kind of like the line where he says that his mother thinks that rap's no good. It's definitely better than saying that this chick is no good. It's not a clever line, but in comparison to all these other lines, it's an interesting line. Along with, they want to cut me off the line unless I drive for it. All these handouts are getting out of hand. It's got a cool beat, but when you continue progressing throughout the album, there's not really anything too different about this beat in comparison to all the other beats. Take the next track, You With Me, which I most certainly am not. Another minimalist trap beat, which is okay. He notes that he's on some DMX shit. Thank you, Drake, for pointing out that there's a DMX sample on this track. I forgot I didn't know how to read. It's pretty much an introspective track about his past hedonism, how girls in his life need to understand that they need to grow up and really just understand that this whole partying life isn't that great and how they need to save it for just special occasions or something like that. This rapping in this track is just so general. Got some like weak lines such as, "You're toying with me like a happy meal." I do like some certain lines like, "I had your back when all you did was front." That was decent. But there's maybe some slight beat variation. There's a build that's underwhelming. Just phenomenal how sappy and bitter this track is. It's not flattering to Drake's persona. Then we get the track Feel No Ways, which is another pop ballad of some kind. There's like this drum beat that reminds me way too much of James Ferraro's latest album. Like, that was a throwaway beat off of an album that was full of throwaway beats. And he's pretty much saying how he needed to let this girl go to see where he can go from there. And she wasn't really pleased with that, and blah 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 blah. I had to let go of us to see what I can do. Well, if you didn't know what you could do beforehand, then why did you get in a relationship? Then we get the track Hype. I do like the instrumental. The trap instrumental is like dark. Drake does have some clever lines like, "You're like a GPS, you need a dressing." But then again, he's not really bragging right. If there's one rapper in the face of the earth that does not know how to brag, it's Drake. He has enough credentials on earth to brag about his status in hip-hop, and he's just not doing it right. He's not convincing me with like actual proof or anything of that nature. It's just one underwhelming line after another, or lines that just don't make sense, like, "We're out of here like NASA." Is he saying that you're taking off like a rocket ship, or out of there like the space program is no longer in existence for NASA and eventually NASA will be phased out or something like that? I'm pretty sure it's the former because Drake or his ghostwriters aren't that clever. Then we get the track Western Road Flows, which has a pretty decent soulful sample running throughout the track. It's decent, but he's got some really lame and illogical lines. He mentions how they couldn't get pizza because all they had was pennies, and how if they could go back a century, they could run a business for centuries with that money. No, that's not how it works. It's like a cringeworthy "what are those" reference at most successful rapper under 35. I mean, if you discount Kendrick, then okay. Then we get the next track, Redemption, which is another boring R&B track. It wasn't really cool when he had a few other soft R&B tracks beforehand. It's probably the most minimalist on the entire record. The beat is so scarce that it might as well not even be there. And Drake, he just sounds really disingenuous on this track. I sing like, "I'm trying to get back with you and redemption is on your mind when you're thinking about me." As if, oh, you're so great that a woman that really didn't care that much for you in a relationship and is already in another relationship she's already satisfied with is going to all of a sudden change their mind because you're Drake. Okay, let's pretend that makes sense. And then there's like a slight beat variation where all of a sudden he just starts contradicting himself. Like, oh well, I don't really care that much for my ex-lovers anymore. Yeah, but you're writing entire songs. You and your ghostwriters are writing entire songs introspecting about that. Obviously, you still do care to an extent. Although I did like the tip the scale weighing my options line. That was pretty clever. Let me get the track With You. The Party Next Door feature sucked. The beat is so skeletal, it's so hollow that once again it might as well not be there. And Drake's not really impressing me either. It's just more sap to add to the sap pile. It's a throwaway track. And then we get the track Faithful, which has the best feature on the entire album, Pimp C. It's weird how the best feature on this entire record is a guy that's been dead for 9 years. Although I do like the really off-kilter and kind of trappy beat that's on this track, though Drake doesn't really come together with very many of an interesting line. Like, the pussy knows me more than I know myself, and probably the worst line in the album, I'ma come on you all summer like a season pass. Either he's saying that he's gonna come all over her like a season pass, or she's going to come to him all summer like a season pass, but either way it's a really unclever and just not that funny or interesting line. Division is on this track, and I don't like Division. I don't see why OVO signed him. He's not that interesting or good. His vocals are okay. He's just not doing anything that saves this track. Then we get the track Still Here, which is some more dark trap bragging of some sort. The bass synth is really lazy. The beat's too skeletal once again. There's a drum break on the track that, if it adds anything to the track, it just adds how anticlimactic it is. Once again, Drake's not doing anything that's any different from the previous several tracks here. Throwaway track. Then we get the track Controlla. It's got a boring beat. The vocal melody is boring. Overall, the track is boring. It's just so underwhelming and lacks any kind of interesting idea that, again, it shouldn't even exist. Then we get one of the singles on this album, One Dance. This beat kind of has sort of a Latin vibe in the piano, but it just seems so much of a put on that I just don't like it. It's just some more generic rap singing that Drake's been known for doing, and it adds nothing to the album. And then we get the track Grammys, which, interestingly enough, I like Future on this track. I don't like what he's saying. He pretty much sucks. He didn't suck as bad as Drake, so that's a plus. Especially when Drake calls OVO a gold mine. Maybe a depleted gold mine, but okay. Let's live in this delusional world that you live in. But still, even though Future is pretty much saying the same line over and over and over again, he has presence. He has an interesting flow. He guides on this beat, which I do like, albeit it sounds like a throwaway What a Time to Be Alive track. But still, good for Future, a rapper that I absolutely despise, for doing something interesting on this track. Then we get the track Child's Play, which I feel like is probably the most misogynistic track on the entire record. The hook is underwhelming, the beat's underwhelming, it's just a really underwhelming track, and it pretty much follows Drake trying to converse with this woman that he seems to be dating that came from the ghetto. They have some racial or preferential differences, I guess. The way Drake responds is by getting hypocritical, like, oh, you're childish, don't make me send you back to the ghetto. What? He's behaving as if her entire fate depends on him. That kind of seems really egotistical. And this is coming from a Kanye West fan. Then we get the track Pop Style, which I had potential to like, seeing as the original version had Kanye West on it. But for whatever reason, they completely axed his verse out. His verse was really clever, but now it's just a solo Drake song. Essentially, it's a dark instrumental. It's pretty much just spacey and dark instrumental as starting out, but then we get this bass synth and sub-bass fusion that is mixed like crap. It adds to the off-kilter vibe, which I think Kanye West slayed on and pretty much saved that track. But with Drake just doing his thing on the track, it adds nothing. Especially with like these half-assed freestyle-ish lines like, I got so much chains, call me Chaining Tatum. Or this one, my friend's so big, he eats at Hardee's. The track Too Good, which that beat's somewhat okay, but who asked for a Drake and Rihanna duo that is just, once again, full of sap? They got pretty much the same pitch, the same lyrics, the same everything. And it doesn't even sound that good when they're both singing at the same time. I feel like this track could have served itself better as a bonus track instead of just ending up in the meat of the album as a whole. Then we get the track Summer's Over Interlude, which it's a cool track. It's a decent interlude. There's some uncredited vocals from Majid Jordan. I still understand why we're just now getting an interlude track of all things when we could have used one somewhere in the middle or a few of them in the middle to make this album more palatable, or at least for me anyway. Next track, Fire and Desire. It's one of the better slow R&B pop tracks on the album. I like the beat. I just don't see why we needed another one of these when the past several were tracks that I don't really care that much for. I just don't find Drake to be sexy. I don't find his voice or his lyricism to be lust-inducing. I'm sorry. And then the closing track, Views. Weirdly enough, it's probably my favorite track on the entire record. There's a nice soulful sample going on at the beginning of the track that I like a lot before the trap instrumental just gets really hard-hitting and really intense and really climactic. I enjoy this beat a lot. And Drake actually has some cool lines on this track as well. Trying to throw curveballs at you, but the glove was already fitted. As well as how he doesn't like dealing with these fake rappers or people in the music industry. Since it's like at the front of the plane, it's all business. And he even has this one little caveat where he says that he was left room to do better. I want to conclude saying that I really do hope he does better because I don't think he did that great at all on this album. So overall, I was really disappointed with this album. The few moments that I liked weren't that great that I wanted to listen to this whole 73 minutes ever again. The beats, for the most part, are okay-ish and decent-ish, but they all just bleed into one another. There's like not a whole lot of ways to distinguish which one's which. And Drake himself is not really compelling. Maybe for a few moments, like namely like the moments where he's getting braggadocious and kinda up front with all these bangers in the background. But all at once he's not really using compelling language. To an extent, I expected to be kind of disappointed with this album, given when I heard Pop Style, when I heard One Dance, but I did not expect to be like this let down by an album. I know I said in the beginning, I said that I had to love this album, otherwise I'm gonna hate it, but I wanted the Damage Control to be where I could see myself just being on the fence with this project, and I'm pretty sure people are going to be on the fence with this project. A good chunk of this was preferential, and that's, like I've said before, that's all these reviews tend to be, preferential. But even then, it doesn't excuse this album from being so lackluster and so not great. This was going to be Drake's classic. There's just so much hype for this album, and I feel like that Drake not only just doesn't deliver, he just doesn't step out the door to do so. This album is a negative 2.4 out of +3. If you're a Drake fan, give this a try for yourself. You might like it more than me. I don't get why you guys like Drake, but more power to you. Given a listen to this, I just couldn't stand it. It's like around the 6th track, I just wanted this album to be over, and I'm glad I'm getting this review out now so that way I never have to listen to this shit ever again. Have you given this album a listen? What did you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that, and what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? This is CWD Music Reviews here, signing off.